Good evening, constant reader. In 1919, American journalist Charles Fort compiled a vast assortment of unexplained phenomena detailing bizarre feats that defied our notions of the natural world. Bright objects flying through the sky, children who can move objects with their mind, men and women nowhere near a fire spontaneously burst into flames. Fort's exploration of these mysterious events ushered in a new field of study, anomalistics. This was the use of the scientific method to evaluate anomalies, events and abilities outside our current realm of understanding. But an anomaly is just that, exceedingly rare, perhaps once in a lifetime or once in 1,000 years. But what if such powers could be manifested not by genetic happenstance, but by chemical inducement? That is precisely what governments around the world have hoped to achieve since the beginning of the Cold War. In the 1950s, the CIA carried out Operation Midnight Climax, in which prostitutes were used to lure so-called test subjects into an observation chamber disguised as a bedroom. The subjects were given LSD in order to test the drug's potential for mental control. In the 1970s, the US government expanded their parapsychology research, hoping to perfect remote viewing, an ESP ability which supposedly can be used to visualize details from far away. The hope was that someone could be sitting in a locked room somewhere in Nevada, and in their mind's eye that someone could see the interior of a Soviet base 8,000 miles away. But these failed experiments pale in comparison to the work of Dr. Joseph Wanless. He was the mastermind behind a drug known as Lot 6. It was, and still is, a top-secret project run by the Department of Scientific Intelligence, a shadowy organization sometimes known as the SHOP. The chemical drug known as Lot 6 was a synthetic glandular secretion designed to change the very chromosomes of the test subject. Lot 6 was meant to unlock godlike powers within the common man. And unfortunately for Dr. Wanless and the rest of the SHOP agents, it worked. Keep in mind, most of the following information has been obtained from documents of a questionable nature, so if you don't wish to learn their secrets, or the secrets of Stephen King's novel Firestarter, you may wish to deviate from your course of action. All right, still here? Good. In May of 1969, psychologist Dr. Joseph Wanless invited the students of Ohio's Harrison College to participate in an experiment. Very few details were offered. However, rumors spread that the test involved hallucinogenics, which inspired hundreds of students to apply. And the offer of $200 sweetened the deal all the more. But Dr. Wanless needed only 12 subjects. Those 12 students assembled in room 70 in the Jason Gurney Hall. They were sequestered there for 48 hours, supervised by doctors and SHOP agents. Although the students had verbally been informed that half would receive the drug and half would receive a placebo, this was not a double-blind test. There was no control group. All 12 of the students received the drug, Lot 6. Shortly after this chemical substance was administered, several of the patients began to feel adverse effects. Within the first hour of the test, one young man experienced convulsions, seizures. The staff performed emergency procedures as the student went into cardiac arrest. He did not survive. A female test subject began to scream. She begged to be put out of her misery, exclaiming, "Being dead would be better than this." The most disturbing reaction happened to a male student who clawed out his own eyes. He was rendered permanently blind and severely insane. Fortunately, not all of the results were this nightmarish, at least not at first. During the 48-hour-long experiment, the scientists asked a student named Vicky Tomlinson to knock down a set of dominoes using nothing but her thoughts. Another student, Andrew McGee, exhibited signs of telepathy. He was able to reveal personal, even confidential details about some of the staff members. It seemed, at least at first, that the strongest sign of success came from the test subject named James Richardson. He exhibited a wide range of ESP abilities, including telekinesis and mental domination. However, after the effects of the drug wore off, all of his paranormal abilities diminished and evaporated completely. In spite of this breakthrough, the Lot 6 experiment was considered a failure by Wanless's superiors, and no further tests were conducted. This was in no small part due to the difficult and expensive cover-up that followed. As a result of Lot 6, 2 college students had died painful deaths. 2 more had been driven insane by the drug, maiming themselves. The test subject who clawed out his eyes was one of these 2. The other one was rendered into a constant state of psychotic paralysis. Instead of releasing those 2 mentally impaired students, the shop made them disappear. Friends and family had no clue as to their whereabouts, but according to the shop's pay stubs, both students were shipped to a secret compound on Maui. And if that sounds like a luxury facility, it's more likely that the 2 teens who went from being citizens to permanent test subjects spent the remainder of their days in windowless rooms, under heavy sedation and constant surveillance. So, 2 dead students and 2 students off the map. The shop did its best to cover its tracks. Medical reports indicated that the student who died from cardiac arrest suffered from a pre-existing condition, but relatives and the college administration were still suspicious. In response, the shop spent $750,000 in payoff money, hoping to keep things quiet. But that may not have been enough for some family members who wanted answers. This was the case of the godfather of the student who clawed his own eyes out. Seeking answers, this man threatened to go to the press. Shortly afterward, he disappeared as well. It wasn't until 2005, when underwater welders were working in the Baltimore Harbor, they made a gruesome discovery: a skeleton, its feet encased in blocks of cement. Dental records confirmed that this was the same man who dared to question the shop on behalf of his missing godson. If this cover-up seemed sloppy, that's because it was. Those of us who are invested in conspiracy theories often believe that a deep state puppet master government is pulling the strings, adroitly covering up its tracks, leaving no trace behind. We tend to believe that everything is perfectly orchestrated. But people talk. As Shakespeare writes, truth will come to light. Murder cannot be hid long. True, sometimes it may take decades, but truth will out. For example, the Tuskegee experiment began in 1932. Over 300 black sharecroppers were observed for decades. The government officials and medical staff knew that the men had latent syphilis, yet the doctors did not treat the disease. They didn't even administer penicillin simply because someone in the government wanted to see the long-term effects of untreated syphilis. The result was a death toll of over 100 people and a disease that was spread to wives and children. But in 1972, this experiment was halted thanks to the investigative team of Gene Heller and the Associated Press. In the same way, despite its sinister powers, the shop was also not immune to the press. In fact, its adversary came not from the New York Times or the Washington Post, but from an unlikely magazine known as Rolling Stone. They published a disparaging expose on the Department of Scientific Intelligence detailing butchered operations, including the exchange of huge shipments of heroin in order to obtain information on Cuban-American groups in Miami. Then there was an infamous hijack attempt in the 1960s. The shop chose to resolve the situation by exploding the entire airplane, killing not only the hijackers, but 60 innocent passengers. This article would not be the only shots fired by Rolling Stone magazine, but we'll return to that later. The tragedy of the Lot 6 experiments did not end on that spring day in 1969. James Richardson seems to be the only person among the 12 test subjects who did not disappear or die under mysterious or violent circumstances. After graduation, Richardson moved to Los Angeles and has since recently retired from his managerial position at the Telemine Corporation. None of the other patients appear to be nearly as lucky. In 1972, a former test subject died in a car accident. The highway patrolman, in his report, stated that the lack of skid marks indicated either the driver's gross negligence or a willful intention to drive into the ravine. In 1973, another test subject jumped from the roof of the Cleveland Post Office building. Before plummeting 5 stories to the sidewalk below, the former Harrison student left a note saying, "I couldn't stand the pictures in my head any longer." Between 1974 and 1977, 3 more test subjects took their own lives. In each case, this turn of events seemed sudden, unexpected by loved ones. With 9 of the former test subjects dead or disappeared, that left James Richardson, as well as Vicki Tomlinson and Andy McGee. And as fate would have it, Vicki and Andy, those 2 college students who met as a result of the Lot 6 experiment, fell in love. For Vicki and Andy, there was no apparent depression, no paranoia, no self-harm. But were there lingering effects from the Lot 6 chemical? Did their ESP abilities remain? Captain James Hollister did not believe so at first. He was the head of the Department of Scientific Intelligence during the 1960s into the 1980s. Among many other nefarious enterprises, he may have been the man responsible for the Lovecraftian disaster known as the Arrowhead Project. And there was also a secret lab in the desert called Project Blue, which synthesized the deadliest viruses on the planet The sort of thing you pray will never, ever be released. Not to mention, there was yet another secret lab that accidentally reversed the aging process of a hapless janitor. Basically, Hollister had a lot of spinning plates, some of them cracked, yet somehow he mustered up the manpower to keep Mr. and Mrs. McGee under surveillance. Sporadically at first, then came the arrival of their daughter, Charlene Roberta McGee, born March 24th, 1975. At the warnings of Dr. Wanless, Hollister upped the surveillance. Soon, the shop agents noticed strange incidents. Smoke coming from the child's bedroom window. Screams from the kitchen. A panicked rush to the emergency room. With these covert observations, Dr. Wanless deduced that the minor or latent ESP abilities in the parents had converged within the girl. He believed that the girl had pyrokinesis, the ability to create fire with her mind. And she is not the only human to supposedly develop such powers. In 1882, the Michigan Medical News published an article about a man named Asbury William Underwood. This man astounded doctors and scientists. He was able to produce extreme heat from his mouth and hands, enough heat to set napkins on fire. His renown grew, and in 1927, Vice President Charles Dawes personally investigated these claims and determined that it was not a hoax. Underwood could spontaneously produce and control flames. The question the shop considered was this: could the McGee girl burn more than just napkins? They must have pondered such questions while they continued their surveillance of the McGee family. Until, that is, when Charlene reached the first grade. Then, something happened. At that time, Andrew McGee was working as an English professor at a small Ohio college. He was in the middle of lunch with fellow faculty members when suddenly he stood up, a sudden look of concern on his face. Then he left the college, and he never returned. Since then, Andy, Vicky, and their daughter, nicknamed Charlie, disappeared. Did the family attempt to escape surveillance and begin a new life? Or did Hollister and his agents finally decide to collect them? Or did something else happen? Here's what we know. The McGees left the house the same day Andy suddenly left for work. There were no moving vans, no signs of planning for departure. Eventually, their house was foreclosed upon, and the real estate agent assigned to the property said that the house still looked lived in. Food was still in the refrigerator. Clothing filled the closets. The most eerie detail was discovered in a laundry cupboard. It was a woman's fingernail with a piece of skin still attached. We searched the archives of the Harrison Police Department to see if any criminal activity occurred on the day of the McGee disappearance. There weren't any unusual arrests made, but we did find this 911 call.
911, what is your emergency?
Hey, I'm not sure this qualifies as an emergency, but there's a man about to get into a fight with two other men. It looks like they're arguing about a little girl that's with them. So it might be a family dispute, but I think two of the men have guns.
Sir, what do these men look like?
Two of them are in business suits, I guess. I don't know if they're police, feds, maybe. And the one guy looks like, I don't know, could be a teacher or something. Oh, the guy in the suit just dropped his gun. The other one, he's yelling something.
Sir, is there someone hurt?
Everything's fine. Everything's perfectly normal.
Now that, I think you should, oh, actually, Actually, there's nothing to worry about. Oh, thank goodness. That's a relief. Operator, I'm so sorry to have troubled you. Everything is perfectly fine. Perfectly normal.
There are a lot of variables here, but if the two men in the suits were shop agents, and if the girl in question was Charlene, then it seems as though there was a serious confrontation, and that McGee's power of mental domination stayed with him in secret long after the Lot 6 experiment. And we may have since happened upon more evidence to indicate that Andrew McGee was in fact very powerful. While vacationing at an exclusive resort in Palm Beach, Florida, podcaster George Hatfield happened upon a box of seemingly official documents stored in a bathroom that had been closed for repairs. According to Hatfield, there was an entire folder dedicated to a man known as A. McGee. The documents indicated that he was a fugitive who had changed his name several times and had opened up several fly-by-night businesses in which he possibly used telepathy or some form of mass hypnosis to alter the behavior of his clients. For a brief time in New York City, he ran a business called Confidence Associates. It catered to managers in the corporate sector who suffered from various issues, anything from weight gain to tobacco addiction to low self-esteem. According to the documents, McGee's program was a success, but using his mental domination ability to alter the life patterns of his clientele took a toll. Each time he pushed a client, it caused headaches, migraines, perhaps even minor strokes or brain damage. This folder, which we assume has been declassified, also contained a dollar bill. Hatfield took a photo of it here. The official document claims that while McGee and his daughter were on the run from authorities, Andrew offered this dollar bill to a cab driver in order to obtain a ride to the airport. But here's the thing. McGee said to the man that he was offering him a $500 bill. It should be noted that George Hatfield has since gone missing, and we all pray for his safe return. These are photographs of a DSI property in Virginia. These electric fences set at a deadly voltage surround the ruins of two plantation mansions, historic buildings, which had been turned into a compound run by Hollister. In 1983, dozens of agents and government personnel died in this blaze. News outlets were never able to specify which terrorist organization was responsible. However, they all seem to agree that one traitor in particular was responsible for the explosion, a man named John Rainbird. Supposedly, he worked as a custodian on the compound. However, rumors have since circulated indicating that he was one of the shop's most prolific hitmen. But we have a different theory as to who reduced the shop's headquarters to ashes. Charlene McGee, nicknamed Charlie, the child of Lot 6. And this isn't just wild speculation. It's based on evidence that came to light a few years ago. In 2019, the press got a hold of some rather unusual information from an even more unusual source. A laptop abandoned in a Delaware repair shop. One of the leaked documents from this device appears to be a correspondence between shop agents. It is written shortly before the fiery explosion at the Virginia compound, and it reads as follows. Last word. Are you sure you want to continue these tests? Lately, I just have to think about that kid, and I start to get very antsy. I start thinking about things like pulsars and neutrinos and black holes and Christ knows what else. There are forces loose in this universe that we don't even know about yet, and some we can observe only at a remove of millions of light years and breathe a sigh of relief because of it. The last time I looked at that film, I began to think of the girl as a crack, a chink, if you like, in the very smelter of creation. I know how that sounds, but I feel I would be remiss not to say it. God forgive me for saying this with 3 lovely girls of my own, but I personally will breathe a sigh of relief when she's been neutralized. If she can produce 30,000 degrees of spot heat without even trying, have you ever thought what might happen if she really set her mind to it? A snippet of an interdepartment memo between Bradford Hayek and Patrick Hochstetter. Several months after the shop compound had burnt to the ground, Rolling Stone magazine dropped a bombshell. This investigative report claimed that a young girl, who went unnamed in the article, was abducted by the Department of Scientific Investigation, that agents from the shop attempted to harness her pyrokinetic abilities. The article included testimony of the editors, the reporters, each one providing their own eyewitness account of the girl's fantastic abilities. The Rolling Stone also invited Marcello Truzzi, an anomalistic expert following in the footsteps of Charles Fort, who confirmed the reality of the girl's powers. The article was met with great skepticism at first. This eventually shifted into amazement when documentary footage was released. The girl in the report was called Jane Doe to protect what little anonymity remained. Fortunately for her, she was never brought forward, and it is unclear if the shop or any other institution was ever able to apprehend her, or even if they wanted to at this point. We do know that the documentary footage ignited a frenzy of media speculation and public outrage. Deputy Press Secretary Marlon Fitzwater finally responded to questions about the Rolling Stone article. He explained that the claims were baseless and the hysteria had been generated as a Hollywood publicity stunt. Fitzwater contended that the documentary was obviously special effects footage for an upcoming film directed by Mark L. Lester. And in 1984, partially funded by the Department of Scientific Investigation, that film was released. The public's fear and outrage was snuffed out. This series of events shows us that the truth can be right in front of us, seemingly undeniable, but because we are bombarded with so many lies, with so much deception, it's difficult to decide what is real. And so it all boils down to a matter of faith. Thank you for watching and listening to the Stephen King Book Club. If you have a favorite moment from Stephen King's novel Firestarter, let us know in the comments. And as always, thank you for clicking the like button and subscribing to our channel.